Welcome back to my channel. This is Coach DC from All 22 Films. Tonight, I've got a film study and commentary about the Lions' newest defensive acquisition, veteran inside linebacker Devin White, still only 28 years old. Before we get to the film, which I've got a significant amount of, I was somewhat wrong about how he's deployed, at least with the Raiders in 2025. Basically, in their defensive structure, he was the will linebacker in their base defense, whether it was a 3-4 or a 4-3. We're talking about 7 guys assigned as primary defensive linemen and inside linebackers. He was a will linebacker, typically set to the weak side of the formation or into the boundary. However, when they were in their nickel or dime set, and Landon Roberts, number 52, is off the field, White transitioned to the Mike linebacker, oftentimes set up to the field, which of course is where Jack Campbell plays in Detroit. All right, let's get right into the film. I've got a ton of plays from 2 of the Raiders games in 2025. One against the Titans, and then a Week 14 loss to the Broncos, 24-17. This is 3rd and 7. This will be his sack, one of his 2.5 sacks in 2025, set up in a mug look, obviously to try to confuse the quarterback and or the offensive lineman. Devin White's very athletic. He's quick. He's got a mindset to get to the football. One thing to mention, I think Lions fans will take note of, obviously, is he's very durable. He plays 100% of the snaps in 2025. Did miss some time, I think, in 2024 with the Texans. Here he forces a fumble. He's a very violent, stronger football player than I was aware of, to be honest with you. In this Week 6 game against the Titans, I think he had 9 tackles, 1 sack, forced fumble, which you see here, an interception, which I won't necessarily show you. I'm going to focus on his, to be honest with you, stats, not necessarily lining up with the perception of who Devin White is. And it's a small sample size, don't get me wrong. What I'm talking about is he made 170, in fact, I think 174 tackles in 2025. Let me address one thing that I heard on social media. I didn't see a whole lot of weak tackles that are credited to him, meaning pushing a quarterback or a wide receiver out of bounds on a scramble or a short completion, and you're receiving credit for it because you're the closest guy there. I didn't see that at all. I didn't see that dynamic show up other than one time across the 2 games film that I'm going to show you, and then a 3rd game that I had watched, their blowout loss to the Eagles, where in fact he had, I think, 18 tackles. Another perception that I had of Devin White, probably relating to his time in Tampa Bay when he was, paired up with Levante David, who obviously a Hall of Fame caliber inside linebacker. White isn't just a speedster, a little bit more physical presence in the box than I thought. Here, from a positional alignment, if you do this field and boundary-wise, he's the Mike backer with the Landon Roberts being the will, but I know that in their defensive structure, Roberts is actually the Mike. He's the guy that comes off the field on 3rd downs because he's not really great in pass coverage. The Raiders have stemmed Crosby down against this 5-man surface. So 5-man surface means guard, tackle, tight end. That's obviously 4. And then wide receiver who's walked into the box to create that 5th man to one side of the formation. It's an interesting look. It's on the first possession. I guess they're trying to make it spill outside. And that's what happens here. So the tight end, 88, is stepping down to Devin White. Everybody's working to the middle. It's almost kind of duo-esque, if you will, even though I don't think there's all duo blocking here, but that's typically how you see duo run at the NFL level. It's a compressed formation, 4 or 5-man surface to one side, somewhat predetermined that that's where the running back's going to bounce it or kick it out to. Devin White and then Jeremy Chin both see the football. This is one thing I believe that White is better at than I was prepared for, or then, again, my perception would have been, which is taking on blockers and then getting off said blockers to get to the football. Here you can see that he's got eyes on the running back as he bounces to the outside. His former Cowboys running back, Tony Pollard, and then White gets in on the tackle with a host of other guys. This is first possession, I should explain as well. He actually had 3 tackles, had a tackle on each of the first 3 plays. Not really impressed with the Raiders' defensive structure. Haven't been at all. Of course, as a Ravens fan and content creator, I went through Max Crosby film when the Ravens traded for him. In addition, I did a film study on very athletic outside corner Darian Porter that the Raiders drafted last year, and I was never impressed with the structure that Patrick Graham put out there. He's the Steelers' defensive coordinator for 2026, so obviously I'll get an opportunity to find out because they'll play the Ravens twice. So skip forward one play. A second down play, he actually made the tackle there as well. 3rd and 1, really physical rep from him. A goal line look as far as the Titans offense the Raiders defensive response. Kevin Zeitler is the right guard who's illustrated by that yellow line. He's going to have the kick out block on the edge defender, and then the fullback is going to ISO lead up to Devin White. What I'm talking about there is that angle there that you see by White meeting up with the blue line illustrated by the fullback's path. Really violent collision, and I think White wins this matchup. In fact, he actually tackles the running back short. I love to zoom in on this stuff so you can see some of the action, some of the hand placement. This, to me, you've obviously got the fullback being lower than Devin White, and this is what I mean when I say he's a little bit more physical and a little bit stronger than my perception was. Very violent take on with that fullback there. You can see the explosion that happens with the fullback's lower half. Really crumples his the lower half of his body. Let me give you the end zone angle of this one so you can see the fullback's path, number one, and how White takes on the block. This really fits, I think, with Detroit's mentality. They've got a lot of depth there between Jack Campbell, who's an all-pro, obviously. I think Jack Campbell played at a similar level in 2024, just didn't get credit for it. Derek Barnes, really versatile guy. Not necessarily as good in coverage as Alex Anzalone, not as versatile, I guess you could say. And then Rodrigo, a little bit more of a coverage inside linebacker. And Devin White, I think, makes it a really good group. Same play, like I said, from the end zone angle, taking on that fullback, kind of blowing it up. You can see the wall that's been created by the Titans' offensive line. If Devin White doesn't win this engagement with the fullback, then they probably don't stop this play. Really beautiful example of short yardage football. I don't know that it's as technical as what some people would want, but getting his right foot in the ground, right shoulder, same foot, same shoulder, blowing up the fullback even though his pad level isn't as low. And by the way, like I said, it was ruled short for the Titans, and then they had to punt. We're into the second possession here, and I will be honest with you, as I came through watching the film, 2 games and then the Eagles game, which I decided not to cut a whole bunch of film of, even though Devin White played really well. It makes me wonder about the usage for Derek Barnes. Where and how are Barnes and White going to fit in? I don't mean that White is going to supplant and take all of Barnes' reps. Essentially what I'm offering you is I wonder if we're still going to see some times or opportunities where Barnes is set up as an edge defender and White will be the will linebacker into the boundary. Basically both of them being on the field with Jack Campbell, but not necessarily in a 4-3 personnel group. This is the second possession. It's an empty pass play on 3rd and 10, and in fact, the boundary side receiver, Calvin Ridley, is going to win all the way across the field against, I believe it's Caillou Blue Kelly. I'll talk about White's coverage stats here in a moment and how it doesn't line up with what I saw on film. I'm not saying he's a great coverage defender. I'm just saying I haven't seen the overwhelming number of targets that have been attributed to him as the closest defender or the guy responsible in coverage. But again, the orange route is the one that wins here from a Titans perspective. White is going to be assigned to cover the running back who's illustrated by that blue line. I think it's Tyjae Spears. One thing he does do occasionally is I feel like he oversteps a little bit, whether it's in coverage or even when approaching to make a tackle. So I'm talking about what happens here. I wonder if because he has a leverage disadvantage, meaning he's lined up further to the inside, closer to the football, closer in this direction than the running back is, sometimes I feel like that's the precursor to him overstepping. It doesn't really lose, the running back doesn't lose him here across the field. Obviously on a 3rd and 10, Devin White's going to be able to make the tackle, we would assume, and end up forcing another Titans punt on the second possession. I think he's better in these situations than I perceived. When I watch the actual coverage snaps and don't just look at stats or metrics, he seems to be in better position. Don't notice the high number of missed tackles for White that others do. I'm not saying that they're there at all. I would say that he needs, a little bit of tightening up maybe as far as the footwork. But look, there's a lot of missed tackles by the Raiders defense in this film, and most of it is not, at least in my opinion, attributed to Devin White. We've moved forward a lot here as far as gameplay. We're into the 4th quarter. They've replaced Elandon Roberts, or perhaps he got injured, so now I think it's Tommy Eichenberg set up as the Mike backer to the field. It's a 1st and 10. They've obviously got a big lead. I'm going to talk about the coverage stats in a moment for Devin White. He's the will linebacker here. Now, the will linebacker into the boundary is oftentimes assigned to play more man than the Mike backer. This ends up being a star, what I refer to as a star concept. So we're talking about the mirrored nature of these routes. Those two routes essentially being conceptually similar to those two, even though the depth from the line of scrimmage isn't the same. Devin White is very quarterback reactive or dependent in zone. This is obviously zone, okay? The reason why I mentioned will linebackers play in man is he's a veteran, and I think he does a really nice job of, let me get those lines off the screen, lining up outside of the running back, which can be a pre-snap tell that you are going to play man. Why? Oftentimes running backs are faster than inside linebackers, so when you get route releases like this, directly into the flats by the running back, you want to have the running back out-leveraged pre-snap, as opposed to the other play that I showed you where Tyjae Spears ran all the way across the field where he was out-leveraged. Devin White was out-leveraged to the sideline. It didn't necessarily matter on that play. He wasn't targeted, nor was he really beat. In any case, it's a star concept, like I said. The Raiders have it covered well. Cam Ward's going to scramble out, actually do a really great job of completing the pass along the sideline. I'm going to do this a lot this season, switch in the middle of the play for obvious reasons. But Devin White is up here, and he's very reactive to the quarterback, where the quarterback is looking, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It depends on how the Lions are going to teach their zone concepts. If I was going to talk about the technical skills of Devin White and try to be critical, then I would say he doesn't pattern read very well or very much. Maybe that's indicative of the Patrick Graham scheme or what they asked or didn't ask inside linebackers to do in Las Vegas last season. I wouldn't focus on his coverage stats. Me personally, I would focus on what he does technically that perhaps could be improved upon. If I was involved or I was around, I would say we need to try to get him matching patterns and routes and possibly getting closer to receivers on actual five-step concepts. As an aside, I also like Cam Ward a whole lot more than many others do. Talking about him after his rookie season, I watched the second half of their loss to the Seahawks, where he battled, in particular in the fourth quarter, against four-man rush schemes. Cam Ward is a really difficult guy to get under control. He can escape and scramble, and obviously he can escape and make throws like this one. I'm going to stop here for a moment and talk about those advanced coverage stats to make sure that people are aware. So going through the games that I had some film of or awareness of, week 1 against New England, played really well. I did not cut up any of the film at all, watched probably the first 4 possessions. I think he had 12 or 11 tackles. In any case, from a coverage standpoint, 2 completions allowed on 4 targets or 4 times where he's the closest defender. I don't think those 2 things are really synonymous, targets / closest defender, but 2 completions for 14 yards. Week 4 against the Bears, I actually had that game, had film of that game because the Ravens played the Bears thereafter, but 3 completions on 8 targets or 8 times as the closest defender for a total of 29 yards. In this game against the Titans, 8 completions on 9 targets or 9 times where he's the closest defender. Did have the 1 interception, I think late in the second quarter, and allowed or was attributed with 66 yards. I don't think those numbers are real. I would just be direct. I don't think that the closest defender is always the guy who is responsible. And in fact, that's some of the things that I'm showing you here. I'm trying to give you as in-depth a look as possible. Let me do 2 more stats and then we'll get back to the film. Week 7 and 9, back-to-back games. The Raiders' bye was week 8. Week 7 and 9 against the Chiefs and then the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had 16 tackles in each of those games. He played 100% of the snaps both times. However, was responsible for or attributed with 10 completions on 12 targets for a grand total in those 2 games of 56 total yards. So roughly, I believe that's 4.67 yards per target. In essence, I'm telling you, don't trust the advanced stats unless you're willing to go watch the film. I didn't watch all 17 games, certainly, but the ones that I watched, I did not see a coverage deficient player like so many people have talked about. All right, let's get back into the film. This is a 2nd and 1 in the fourth quarter. Obviously, like I said, they're up by 17 points, more than 2 scores. He's set up as the will linebacker into the boundary. It's an 11 personnel group for the Titans, and a nickel response, depending on how you want to qualify or what you want to call of Jamal Adams. Let me pull this back for a second so you can see the routes. You got an outside vertical release by the top side receiver into the boundary. The outside receiver, the number 3 to the bottom side of our screen, is illustrated by the blue route. He's going to sit underneath the coverage. This happens a lot on Raiders film. You end up getting this kind of like Tampa 2-ish look where the Mike linebacker, I think it's Eichenberg, would be running in the middle of the field essentially to be that third deep player. It's kind of a misnomer when you say Tampa 2 because the Mike linebacker is actually another player who's responsible. He's not an underneath defender. Who is this attributed to? Who would you attribute it to? It's a completion. I did not see 9 targets of Devin White in this game. I guess when the ball arrives, he's the closest defender. If you know anything about Tampa 2, he's a curl defender, and so is Jamal Adams. He's a curl defender. There are things called a no cover zone, NCZ, and that means we're not covering underneath of 5 yards or underneath of 4 yards. The line of scrimmage is right here. This route is certainly within what I would think would be classified as a no cover zone by a lot of people, especially when you have a 17-point lead. Look, I use Pro Football Reference for my stats, and I would trust the basic stats. I'm not sure that I trust this one, to be honest with you. I had that suspicion before when I would look up completions and or targets / closest defender designations, and I'm not happy with what I found out after doing this film study on Devin White. Now, look, I don't do all the legwork. I don't have the time to do that. I just think it's a questionable process to attribute catches and or targets to someone just because they're the closest defender, especially in zone. In any case, we've got a unique alignment here as the will linebacker. Again, we're talking about a 20-3 lead in the fourth quarter. He's going to simultaneously get a missed tackle and make the tackle at the end of this play. But I think you got another example of him kind of oversetting this. Whether it's taking on, whether it's trying to make a tackle or whether it's matching the receiver's route. Sometimes I feel like his footwork could be a little bit better and he kind of oversets what he's trying to do with the boundary side X. In any case, I think you've got a buzz cover 3. That's what I think is happening here. The safety to his side is going to drop down and be a hash defender. White is a flat defender, hash defender, flat defender. And I would call it cover 3 buzz. Certainly, some people would possibly refer to it as cover 6 or quarter half. I don't agree because neither one of these corners is sitting in the flats. I think this is pretty obviously cover 3 into the boundary. And it's a missed tackle. There's too much space. But why is there too much space? Well, because the running back catches the ball 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So even though there's 9.3 or 9 yards of separation, that's what you want. Now, you don't want to miss the tackle, but if you do miss the tackle, you want to miss it to the inside. I think, again, Devin White's got to be a little bit more come to balance, a little bit better with his feet, and not allow the running back to get away from him. He is, however, given the actual tackle at the end of the play. Tyjae Spears, tries to get, I think he ends up getting 4 or 5 yards, so it's a minimal gain. That's the idea behind cover 3, right? Is if you do, that's one of the ideas, is that if you do miss a tackle, you have to miss it on the, quote, correct side so your teammates in pursuit can help. I think it's probably pretty obvious to you guys if you've watched this long. I like the player. I like him more than I expected. This play is not as simple as Devin White will make it look. It's a play action pass. It'll be a touchdown to this tight end here on the backside against one of the safeties. The game's pretty much over here. Like I said, I think we're about 6.5 minutes left. It's really a running back cheat player, what some people call first to the flat. So again, it's Spears. He's going to release to the flats. Devin White is a run defender first. It's a goal line look. But he's going to end up playing that tight end, which is illustrated by that orange route. This is a drill that everybody does in goal line work. Don't get me wrong, but he does a really nice job of it here. If you ask me, his eyes are obviously in the backfield. He's trying to see if the running back's getting the ball. Once he realizes that, there's no way to hand the ball off here with that space between the running back and the quarterback, he turns, goes to pick up the tight end. He's not targeted here. It's a tight end, or it's a touchdown, to the backside tight end. I think it's a pretty good job of him at least turning and running when you're in a difficult situation. There's no margin for error when you are simultaneously asked to be a run defender. He doesn't necessarily have a gap, don't get me wrong, because you got all these guys up here on the line of scrimmage, and you have to check the tight end in man. It's not easy to get that done. I think for the year, 174 tackles, 11 TFLs, the 1 sack that I showed you, 1 forced fumble, 3 PDs. Played 100% of the snaps up to the final week of the season, week 18. In this game against the Broncos, he had 19 tackles and 8 of 8 passing completions or targets to attempts. So, I'll show you some of the film here, and you're more than welcome to let me know if you think these should be attributed or assigned to him. This is the third time, actually, that I've watched this game and done a film study on it. Like I said, when the Ravens acquired Max Crosby, and then I did a film study on Darian Porter, the guy who finished his rookie season in Las Vegas. So this will be another Tampa 2. I think teams know it. I don't know how they know it, but the rationale or the impetus for me to say that to you is because the routes specifically exploit it. So this is trips, and the Raiders have responded with their base defensive personnel. So I'm talking about 2 inside linebackers there, 2 safeties, and then that's Elandon Roberts, who you can see is already set up at depth, and he's going to start to turn and get some depth as if you're going to get a Tampa 2. A lot of teams play this. In fact, Brian Flores plays it a ton. I'm calling it a drop 8 Tampa 2. So you've got 2 half-field defenders, Mike linebacker, who theoretically could run in the middle of the field. They call that run in the pipe. And then an underneath dropper in the form of a defensive tackle dropping out to a side that is predetermined or called out by the defense. What is Devin White supposed to do here? They're limited in their coverage options from a too-high standpoint, in their 4-3 base, I should say. And he's got 2 stop routes, one of them on the hash, one of them at the top of the numbers, approximately 7.7 yards between them. The ball's out really fast. That's the only part that I'm not sure how to navigate as far as using the Once Sport Analyzer and annotating so much on the screen is for you guys watching, do you get a sense of how quickly the ball is released if I'm pausing so much? So, I have a couple of possible solutions there. But in any case, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, in my opinion. If Devin White gets so much width that he's going to be able to be closer to Sutton, well, then Bo Nix's just going to throw the ball to this guy. It's a short, somewhat innocuous completion, don't get me wrong, but I'm including some of these plays to show you so that you guys see. Look, I get the full-length game film, and so many times on film, the Raiders are playing these versions of Tampa 2 or various cover 2 schemes, and it's exploited quickly like this. In particular, Bo Nix did it. You'll see it one other time in this video. If that's attributed to Devin White, I would say that's inaccurate. He's not the primary problem on this play. Granted, it's a small sample size. You're more than welcome to let me know if you disagree. Technically, I think Devin White is the Mike here on a 2nd and 2. This is more so in line with what I perceived of him as far as running after the football. Now, this is still an inside run concept, all right? So it's a lead by the fullback, and so full flow, fullback, tailback going in the same direction. But the left guard, illustrated by that orange line, is going to combo up to Devin White. Now, Devin White goes underneath of this. And oftentimes when you see inside linebackers split, meaning one guy goes over the top and one guy goes underneath, that can be a problem. But it works out here really well, if you ask me. Devin White's a pretty good run defender, more physical than I perceived or more physical than I was aware. I saw him, obviously playing in Tampa Bay. When he played with Lavonte David, oftentimes Lavonte David was set up as the will linebacker. You guys know that as Lions fans because Lavonte David and Sam Laporta had kind of an epic matchup, obviously, in 2023. Laporta's rookie season. Laporta had an ankle injury that I think limited him somewhat, but credit where credit is due. Lavonte David did an amazing job. The reason why I bring that up is the Bucs didn't put Devin White on Sam Laporta in that game, fortunately for them, because I think Laporta would have really given him problems. As far as Devin White goes, he's now had 100 tackles 4 times. Tough, stronger, more rugged guy inside the box on concepts like this than I had the idea of. The combination of players that Detroit has, I know Raiders fans would probably disagree. The only question I have here is who's going to be the will linebacker on 3rd down? It's going to be Devin White. Rodrigo might be the better coverage option. Derek Barnes, possible usage as a hybrid edge defender at times who could drop out. Now, this is a different alignment, and this is kind of what I wanted to talk about in this video. He's certainly not going to be used here with him and Jack Campbell on the field. It's a 3rd and 2. be a missed tackle by Jamal Adams. This shows up across the film. I'm not talking about Jamal Adams nor Devin White. I'm talking about missed tackles. This occurs a lot on the Raiders film. So he's set up as the Mike, Jamal Adams as the nickel, dime, whatever you want to call him. Really, he's the dime backer set to the boundary because what you refer to as the nickel is most often set to the field. In any case, the route by the running back, Bo Nix is throwing this directly into coverage. I mean, he's throwing it now. So again, I recognize you guys are losing some of the perspective of time. Nix is in the process of throwing the football here, and Jamal Adams is converging on it. It should be a finish. It's a missed tackle by him. And in fact, Devin White gets credit for the tackle eventually. Him and the safety are there to clean this thing up. The reason I show that to you is twofold. Number one, missed tackles are everywhere in this defense. Number two, he's now the Mike against 11 personnel in what can be described as a dime cover or a dime structure from a personnel standpoint. When I talked in somewhat negative terms about the structure of the Raiders defense last year, this is one of the examples. There was 3 others that I could have shown. I don't think Devin White is a 1-to-1 replacement for Anzalone. Can't do that. I don't think he's not going to be asked to cover tight ends man like Anzalone was, even though Anzalone, had some struggles at times in 2025. But the fact that Detroit asked him to do that under 2 defensive regimes or defensive coordinators, I should say, I think was notable. Not many will linebackers are asked to do that across the NFL, nor can many of them actually execute it. So Jamal Adams is on the field here. Call it a dime look, if you will. This is a 1st and 10, so it's interesting to me. It's a compressed formation from the Broncos, meaning you've got 10 players on screen in here and 1 receiver off screen to our right. You've got a real gap problem right here. It's Jeremy Chinn who could theoretically play that gap. And you can see that Devin White was saying something to him, and when you see where this running play goes, the open lane, get a pretty good idea that Chinn should have been in that spot. I'm not a fan of the Raiders structure at all. Too many times where you see players that they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. So Devin White ends up fitting here and having eyes in that gap. Jeremy Chinn's not even on the screen. I did zoom in with the magnifier, don't get me wrong, but even if I didn't zoom in, he's not really on the screen. He's not playing a part in stopping this play at all. This is a similar problem, if you ask me, to evaluate Devin White or a lot of players on this defense to the coverage plays I showed you earlier, where there's no good choice. If Devin White was to somehow fit here, well, then the running back is just going to hit this thing downhill and still going to end up getting a 14 or a 15-yard gain. They had difficulty, if you ask me, getting their coverages picked apart. Maybe they're too predictable. It's not an isolated incident to run or pass plays, nor is Devin White or was Devin White the biggest part of the problem. If you've sat around and watched this long, thank you guys very much. I do have 3 more plays here. When I do something like this, I try to be as serious and in-depth as possible. I'm sure that at this point, for you guys that are watching it Sunday night, other people have put out videos about Devin White to evaluate him and talk about him. Whether mine lines up or not, I appreciate you guys checking this one out. It's a very unusual play. He's the will linebacker. You do have a 3 linebacker structure on the field. Devin White, Landon Roberts, and number 49. So you're talking about a base personnel look, whether it's 4-3 or 3-4. You can obviously see that there's 6 guys on the line of scrimmage. He's the will linebacker. He's set up into the boundary. He's going to cover this running back, which I think is Harvey, out into the flats. And then the secondary part of this, or the route that I think is meant to exploit that, is the orange route illustrated by the tight end. Basically, if the will clears out, the tight end can fit onto that space, okay? Where Devin White is lined up, the quarterback could theoretically throw it behind him if Devin White clears out of that space. But the tight end's route is handled by Chinn, number 11, the safety, right here. And you can see that Devin White is all over the running back route as well, so that's not available. Max Crosby kind of jumps to the inside from a pass rush standpoint, and then he's got a late redirect when Bo Nix gets out of there. Crosby doesn't really front up Bo Nix. He just ends up kind of being in the window. Nix chooses not to run it in. That's Devin White kind of pushed the running back out of bounds. Chinn took over that tight end route. Here's Crosby converging. Maybe Bo Nix, could have got in, but Devin White's awareness, I think, shows up here. He's covering the running back man and then is able to recognize if I make contact with him, I can knock him out of bounds, and now he's no longer an eligible receiver. I think this is an underrated play, if you ask me, from Devin White. One question I would have for you, you've watched a lot of plays now at this point. Oh, by the way, the very next snap, Sean Payton made Bo Nix run the football as a quarterback draw, and it ended up being wide open. Payton got in really easily. Based on the film that you've seen, and again, I recognize there's probably been other content creators that got a video out on Devin White sooner than I did. If you put Derek Barnes and Malcolm Rodriguez, both of which who I like a lot, if you put them on the field for the Raiders last year in that defensive structure, if you accept what I'm saying, number one, with 100% of the snaps through 17 games, do you think they replicate Devin White's production? I'm not sure that they do, even though I like both of those guys. And so basically what I'm saying is I think there's a real competition for time on the field at that will linebacker spot. This is another 4-3 response by the Raiders. The three inside linebackers are those three there. Again, Elandon Roberts is the Mike. Devin White is now set to the field, 49 as an inside linebacker into the boundary. He's a hybrid, I think, Sam type player. And again, they're going to drop to what I would describe as a Tampa 2. As an aside, this is a tight end up to the top. That's another tight end there. I think it's Troutman or Trotman. So it is a 12 personnel group from Denver's standpoint. And so I recognize why the Raiders are matching with three inside linebackers. The problem here is the lack of awareness that shows up often. And I think that Devin White is put in the same predicament as the play I showed you earlier on. It's a too high safety structure. You can see the two safeties here, one of which is slightly deeper than the other one. But you've got two short stop routes. Bo Nix getting rid of the ball quickly. You can see that he's delivering the football. What does Devin White do? Does he stay in between these two guys? Which is pretty similar to what we got here. An NFL-level quarterback, especially a good one, is going to be able to get the ball to either one of those guys quite quickly. It doesn't matter that this is the longer throw if he was to step closer to the tight end. What should happen here is some awareness that the tight end is the number 3 receiver by the Mike backer. So we're talking about Elandon Roberts. Again, used to play for the Steelers. Really good run defender, not so much in the past. I think it kind of shows up on film. The combination of those two guys being on the field so much together probably wasn't good. If this is a receiver, you've got more of a threat to run a vertical that you as the Mike linebacker in a Tampa 2 are responsible for. The threat is larger because it's a faster guy. It's a tight end set up as 3. Too much space here, if you ask me. That's the real problem on these types of routes. I'm not saying that this is the overwhelming majority of the pass plays that were completed with Devin White as the closest defender. What I'm offering to you is if you examine the film and you agree with me, you can see that quite obviously Devin White is not the problem on some of these plays. Any quarterback can access that type of concept for a quick 6 to 8 yards. In this case, because the Mike linebacker is converging and Devin White is trying to recover from an outside-in standpoint or outside-in leverage standpoint, the tight end ends up getting 12 yards. 2nd and 10, late second quarter. I think I've got 2 more plays here for you. If you've sat around this long, like I said, thank you, very much. I didn't anticipate watching Raiders film again, a third go-around of it. This is another completion that in the game, maybe it's applied to Devin White. I don't know. It's late second quarter. They're down 14-7. Obviously, don't want to give up a big play. He's set up as the Mike in what I would say is now a dime look. Adams is off the field. This is Chin, who's one of the safeties, hybrid nickel type player, and they've put him in or inserted him as the dime linebacker. Devin White is the only linebacker who stayed on the field. They've got the tight end is chipping Max Crosby, illustrated by that orange line there. He's going to chip Crosby, which they did the whole game, and then release out into the flats. The inside receiver is running this kind of sit route in the middle of the field, somewhat similar to what you see on mesh concepts, and that threatens Devin White. Now, it should be said that the backside safety could theoretically poach or play a role in this, so maybe people would say Devin White could break down sooner on that route. I don't think so. I don't think you leave deeper concepts on a 2nd and 10 when you're playing 4-over-3 zone to the field. I'm including this guy as the third receiver, by the way. And then you're playing what quite obviously to me looks like man to the top side into the boundary. We're talking about these two defenders here. matching up with these two routes. What I'm saying is Devin White has the requisite or the prescribed depth for the routes they're showing up. And then guys have got to rally and come downhill. Bo Nix is a quarterback who will take that. Who's at fault here? I don't think anyone is sometimes. Sometimes no one's at fault, right? It's a no cover zone. If it's inside of 3 yards or inside of 4 yards, or some people would even say 5 yards, and you've got to rally and go down and catch the football. It's 1 minute and 4 seconds left on the snap. I don't think that necessarily anyone is at fault. Again, I recognize that the quarterback getting rid of the ball quickly is somewhat lost by the on-screen annotations, and so still trying to navigate that. Last play that I'll show you here is actually 2 plays after that one that I just showed. It's a 4th and 4. The film did not match up with the coverage stats that I was told, or the coverage stats that I read about from Raiders, some Raiders fans, and in fact from some Lions fans as well. So you get motion across into the flats, that blue line illustrated by those 2 blue lines there. And then the top side number 1 receiver illustrated by the yellow line is going to be the intended target here, or the guy who actually makes the catch. The line to gain is just inside the 40. It's like the 39.5 or 39.6. It's a really nice play by Devin White. I still think the receiver gets this. It's replay assist that determines he didn't get it. Bo Nix is throwing the football out pretty quick, as you can see, underneath this route. I think the receiver gets it, but Devin White's still really nice reaction. Putting his foot in the ground while Bo Nix still has the ball in his hand. That's important, if you ask me. You would like to see more of that. He's got the speed and the burst to come downhill and do these types of things. You would like to see him have a little bit more awareness of the routes that are developing. In this case, it's a 4th and 4, and he's kind of free. I think they're matching a lot of these routes underneath. I think they being the Raiders, are matching a lot of these routes. Really cool play. An opportunity to talk about what he can do if he can respond to routes quicker, pending the coverage that everyone is assigned, number 1. And number 2, his technique/footwork. Like I said, it's late second quarter of a game that they lost. I'm trying to give you guys as good of an idea, or as detailed of an idea, I should say, of the kind of player you are getting. I think he's better than many have talked about from a coverage metric/data standpoint. I know that by the time people watch this, Devin White has probably already had a practice with the Lions. I put this out for late Sunday night. Couple of thoughts here at the end. I think it's a really good inside linebacker group with Campbell, Barnes, Rodrigo, and White. There's just no comparison between White and the rookie that they drafted. Unfortunately, he's hurt. Hopefully he'll be back sooner than possible. But under no circumstance could I see Rolder stepping into that Raiders defense last year. Poorly coordinated and in fact, I think inconsistent and easily exploited structure at times, and put up the stats that Devin White did. Of the 4, it's possible that the best coverage guy, man-to-man, might be Jack Campbell. So Barnes is the hybrid guy. Rodrigo/White maybe is the second best coverage guy from a man standpoint on running backs. On 1st and 10 rundowns, it makes me wonder who's going to be the will linebacker. Are they going to be in a 4-3 structure, meaning you have Campbell, Barnes, and either Rodrigo or White on the field at the same time? One thing I would offer, if they're going to be in 4-3 personnel with the option to walk Barnes up on the line of scrimmage, be an edge defender, would be set Barnes to the field and set Devin White and Aiden Hutchinson to the boundary. You're not going to walk White up as an edge defender. You would do that with Barnes. To me, you would want Barnes and Hutchinson on opposite sides from one another, and that allows White to slot in there as the will. The difference is the coverage umbrella is just going to look different, right? Without Branch and Anzalone, both of those guys could play more man than the players who are quote replacing them. Even though Anzalone had some issues in man coverage at times, especially in 2025 on tight ends, still, Anzalone was asked to do a lot of things that most will linebackers will not be tasked with performing. In addition, Branch to the field in a one-high safety structure could walk up and play man on slot receivers, tight ends, or anyone. If you were to ask me what I see, White looks like a starter for 10 to 12 teams in the NFL, maybe more. Of a defense of the quality as the 2025 Raiders, he's a starter, right? He was not the issue on a lot of the breakdowns that I saw. Structurally, they had problems. Coverage choices by their defensive coordinator seemed to be easily exploitable. There's some personnel weaknesses there as well. They just weren't a good team. I'm not being insulting towards the Raiders. They'll probably be more vastly improved this season, but the facts are the facts. They were 25th in the league at 25.4 points per game allowed. Just not a good quality overall, despite having a superstar, obviously, in Max Crosby. Now, on a fully healthy team with the Lions in 2026, White could certainly be a guy that plays a lot. That's not what Detroit has right now, right? Brian Branch out for a while. Kirby Joseph, who knows when he'll return. The coverage umbrella, the way that things will look, could be more zone centric. The film to me of Devin White looked pretty good. I did see 2 missed tackles in this one of which I showed. I did not see all of the instances or examples of him being exploited or picked on or abused in coverage, nor did I see him being credited with tackles when ball carriers, quarterbacks, running backs, receivers just run out of bounds. That popped up one time. His 174 tackles look legit to me. If I can make decisions based upon the 2 games that I cut up here to present to you, as well as the third game, the Eagles, I think a 30 or 31 loss, 31-0 loss. If I could extrapolate that or make a declaration based upon a small sample size of film. I saw a really good player. Smart, tough, better in coverage than advanced stats show, and many Raiders fans talk about. They had a whole lot bigger issues than Devin White in 2025. I'm glad he's in Detroit to see what he can do. I'm interested, somewhat intrigued by the way that they could deploy these 3 or 4 inside linebackers. I do expect them to be in a nickel alignment more often, and that puts Devin White and or Barnes or Rodrigo set up as the will into the boundary, so create some competition, possibly. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comment section. Didn't necessarily mean to go on this long about it, but once I get into talking about a player, and I feel like I've discovered something that doesn't line up with the perception, my own in this case, and the advanced stats that are out there talking about his coverage responsibility, then I feel like I've got to go a little further to A, satisfy my own interest level, and B, hopefully put out some type of content that you guys as Lions fans enjoy. If you think other Lions fans would like to hear my thoughts as well as the film that I used to illustrate my points and what I believe about Devin White, at least from last year's film, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach. Appreciate you guys' time.